What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the DX Gamer Show. I'm Mike, aka Operation DX, and it is back to business here in episode 13. Not that I necessarily meant to sidetrack the series in the previous two episodes. I was actually expecting to get a little bit more science than we got, but that's okay. And I was kind of expecting to get some experience for the pilots. Nope, that didn't happen either. Perhaps I should have picked up one of the contracts that specifically had me do those missions, and some of those things may have happened. Anyways, we need to do a little bit of research here. We've got a few points to spend to do the next contracts coming up here. So I need to get some stations up into orbit. One needs to go over Kerbin, one needs to go to Minmus. And then for my Duna trip, I want to get a little bit stronger landing legs that we have. The landing legs that we have right now are pretty piddly, and yeah, I just want to get something a little bit stronger. Now, my mission to Duna is essentially going to be an unmanned trip for pretty much testing. It's going to be my testing phase to Duna, so I can kind of experiment with my aero braking maneuver and all of that good stuff. Ooh, and I want to check this stuff out here, the scanning for the resource stuff, so looking forward to getting to that part of the tech tree. Once I unlock those nuclear engines, man, it's going to be jamming. But yeah, I also want that science package too, because that'll give me a whole bunch of more science that I can get in pretty much all the places I've been to so far. Anyways, like the previous couple of episodes, I have pre-built these vehicles. As you can see, they're nothing super complicated. So this is the station that is going to go up above Kerbin and Minmus, and I put a probe core on the top. It is going to be an unmanned deployment here. And yeah, it's nothing super special, guys. It's just I used one of those new engines I just researched, a couple of medium-sized tanks with some liquid fuel external tanks. No big deal. The actual core of the station isn't super spectacular. I'm not using that processing lab yet. Certainly, I will launch one of those mobile processing labs up into orbit sometime in the future. My concern right now is my Kerbal Task Force Space Force is rather small, and I don't want to get them hung up putting them in the processing labs this early in the game. I want to kind of level them up, and then maybe I'll stick them in there later. And then after I've hired a couple more Kerbals or rescued a couple more Kerbals, I will start thinking about putting them into that kind of thing. But anyways, my philosophy with these station cores, even though they're very minimalistic, I mean, the requirement in the contract was only to have a few things: docking ports, power, and transmit. So it's got no science packages, but it does have those docking ports, which I will use to expand upon the station in the future. I don't know if I'll do too much expansion on the Minmus station, but I will expand on the Kerbin station, and I would like to get one of these into the orbit of the moon, and then possibly use it as a refueling station off to a further destination like Jewel. I'm pretty sure my Duna craft, I'm not going to have any problem launching from Kerbin to Duna, so we're going to be doing that in this episode anyways. So I have my first station in position, and of course I had the two contracts, so one around Kerbin, one around Minmus, as I was just talking about. So we're going to go ahead and return to the Space Center and go to the VAB, and this same craft is pretty much sitting in there, because when you launch a craft, it's pretty much the same craft is loaded in the VAB. So this time around, we're just going to go ahead and rename the station, because I had the station, it's Kerbal Space Station K, and this one's going to be M for Minmus. I probably should make sure that the symbol on that one is set as a space station. I kind of like having that, so you can, like, at a glance, look at the map and see, oh yeah, that's what that was, that kind of thing. Or it's a probe, or it's a spaceship, or a lander, or whatever it is. I really do like that. Anyway, in the previous episodes, in the comments, some of you have expressed interest to fly some of the craft you saw in the previous couple of episodes. There's nothing really spectacular as far as range, but one of the craft is pretty fun to fly, that vertical takeoff and landing craft, which I just really like building those. I'm like, I don't care if the new version makes it difficult, I'm going to do it anyways, and I certainly did indeed. So I will make those available to download in this episode if you are interested. I use Mediafire, just so you're aware, and that's pretty much where I do all of my uploads and stuff. So if you're, again, interested in downloading that, I will make it available in a link in the description. All right, so now we are just setting up our maneuver node over to min-miss. I'm having a hard time getting a capture here. I know about where the capture is, and I don't want to do a plane change because I know it'll like suck up a ton of fuel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to burn to approximately where I think min-miss is, because if you notice on the maneuver node, I did not get a encounter here. Set min-miss as a target and just didn't get it. So just kind of a fuel saving kind of thing here. So real easy. Got my encounter here, no problem, after I had launched and did a small plane change. And as you see, it does not take very much fuel at all to change that up. And I'll go ahead and be able to burn retrograde. And this thing just barely has enough fuel to go ahead and give it into a stable orbit around min-miss, which is nice. Just didn't have to design another craft in order to do this. So this craft may need a refuel in the future. I don't know. It may just get abandoned. There are no Kerbals on board. One of the things I found kind of interesting is when I was right-clicking on the crew pod, where you can stick 4 Kerbals, it was saying, do a crew report. And then when I right-clicked it again, it's like I tried to do the crew report, and it said, no, you can't do it. There's no Kerbals on board. So watch out. I'm about to do that right here. And yeah, see, because I kept clicking it. It's like, what? So I can put one of these things on and I can get crew reports without Kerbals? No, that is not the case at all. All right. So we have both of our stations up. That was not too bad, not too big of a deal, about halfway through the episode. And now we are going to do the big mission. So what I did here was I used the same exact lifter that I used for my moon landings, and I kind of changed up the top. So again, we're not sending any Kerbals to Duna this first time around. We're experimenting with the aerobraking maneuver. We're experimenting with just a bunch of stuff to see how it handles. Because the atmosphere is thinner, I believe that the LV-909 engines and the bigger engine will function a little more efficiently than I originally thought. So on Kerbin, they don't get a lot of thrust, but in the thinner atmosphere of Duna, they probably will. So I can probably go ahead and build a craft that will be able to return to Kerbin. It'll probably have a little less delta. It'll have a little less thrust than what I'm used to, but I think I can make it back to Kerbin with some Kerbals, and of course that will give me a ton more science. But right now we just have the 2 science packages that are recyclable. So we have our barometric pressure unit and our temperature gauge. So what I'm going to do with this particular mission is I'm going to try to accomplish 3 contracts. So once we leave the sphere of influence of Kerbin, I should in fact be able to accomplish the contract that is the one that is like you're supposed to be somewhat near the sun. I don't know if you're supposed to be actually like really close to the sun or if you're just technically supposed to be in the orbit of the sun. So should be able to accomplish that contract. Then I'm going to head over to Duna and I'm going to do an aerobraking maneuver. I'm going to grab some science along the way there, my outer science, inner science, upper atmosphere science. And then I'm going to head over to Ike, land on Ike, finish that exploration mission for Ike. Then I'm going to come back to Duna, land down, and finish off the exploration mission for Duna. So that is the planned mission for this guy here. Hopefully everything goes as planned. And then finally, I do have one more contract, and it actually is time sensitive. It's a 33-year contract, so I'm actually going to spend 2 years or so, maybe 2 years, going to Duna here. And I'm going to have to figure out how to get a 12 Kerbal outpost up on Ike. So that's going to be pretty interesting. Anyway, as anticipated, you saw me there collecting some data around the high orbit of the sun. and that it did in fact accomplish that contract. So that is done, and now we are heading over to Duna, and I did suspect that this craft would be able to do it. It is a bit lighter on the top, so I figured using that same lifter would be no problem. And not to mention it had a lot of Delta V left over when I returned from Mimus, so this craft I thought would be perfect to head over to Duna as long as the top wasn't too heavy, so I didn't have to build some crazy lifter, so that is all good. Here I was having some trouble getting a maneuver node, so I had to manually set up my approach for Duna, and I just tried to make it as close as I possibly could. What I like to do is get it relatively close, and then when I get into the sphere of influence of Duna, I'll do my final corrections. I like to always maintain a pro-grade position. In this mission, it is absolutely critical that I stay in a pro-grade position. The reason why is because I want to get that landing on Ike, and it's substantially more difficult if I'm heading retrograde to actually encounter Ike, and I'd be spending a ton more fuel. So anyways, you can see that I'm fidgeting around here with my maneuver node. It's very important that I precisely place it right on the plane and I get everything worked out here. I do my initial burn. I notice that the plane is not how I like it, so I set up another maneuver node, just do another slight tad little burn, and I put myself about 15,000 meters into Duna's atmosphere, and that was my experiment to see if that number will hold. Now, I'm approaching Duna in I wouldn't say it's really super fast, so my craft probably should be able to survive. There's no heat shield that's going to be able to protect my craft, so I was interested to see if the heat indicators were going to start lighting up on my craft. Of course, I couldn't figure out here why I couldn't close my solar panels. I know it's really fast, you can't see what's going on, but sometimes I'll leave the time acceleration up a little too high and I'll forget that I've done that, and it's like, why aren't things working? So I just turn it back down and actually close those panels up, because those would rip away, and I definitely need those for the future of this mission. There's a lot of science to be transmitted here. So here we are, we're just dipping down into the 14-15. Now, I put it at about 15,000, but for some reason, I dipped down below 13, maybe into 12,000 meters, and I was getting concerned that that was almost like a point of no return kind of thing, but it did in fact turn out to be the exact right number. Now, I don't know if it's going to be just for this particular craft, or if all craft will behave in this manner, if like craft are just a little heavier, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see for future missions, but this was definitely a good experiment. It's roughly about the same as it was before. I can't remember. I think my numbers were like 10,000 into Duna's atmosphere. Before, the heat wasn't an issue, so it didn't really matter. But now, it's really important. So not heading super fast, didn't get any heat indicators, and put myself almost into a relatively stable. Once I get to the other end of my periapsis, I will burn to get my apoapse up, and then I will do a burn for the moon, but that is going to take place in the next episode. So right here, I'm just transmitting off the upper atmosphere science, and this one isn't gonna net me as much science as I could have gotten if I actually sent some Kerbals over here, because I would have been able to get all kinds of stuff like the samples and the crew reports, and it would have been worth a whole lot more if I could actually return some of this science back to Kerbin. This is what I decided to do though. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.